What if the person you threw away, the one you deemed worthless, was secretly holding all the cards? Imagine a man who ruthlessly dumps his wife, convinced she's a financial dead end, only to discover she's the hidden heir to a billion-dollar empire. This isn't just a story of revenge. It's a gripping journey into the heart of betrayal, the silent struggles of a woman rediscovering her power, and the shocking moment when a man realizes his greatest mistake wasn't just losing a fortune, but destroying the only thing that was ever real. Get ready, because this story is about to unfold. The finality of it all wasn't in the shouting. That had happened weeks ago. It was in the quiet, methodical way Benjamin Carter sorted through their shared life, creating two distinct piles on the worn hardwood floor of their small apartment, his and hers. His pile grew with a ruthless efficiency, the sleek leather-bound books they'd bought together, the single piece of abstract art he'd insisted on, the expensive espresso machine she'd gifted him for his 30th birthday. Her pile was smaller, a collection of well-loved paperbacks, a chipped ceramic mug with a painted sparrow, the faded quilt her grandmother had made. It was a visual representation of their marriage, his ambition, her sentiment. "Anya, we need to be practical," Ben said, his voice devoid of the warmth that had once made her feel safe. He stood with his hands on his hips, surveying the room as if it were a business asset to be liquidated. He was handsome in that sharp, tailored way that seemed to broadcast success, even when, by his own metrics, he hadn't quite achieved it yet. His jaw was tight, a muscle ticking near his temple. It was his closing the deal face, a look she'd once admired and now found chilling. Anya Sharma, soon to be just Sharma again, sat on the edge of their lumpy sofa, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. She watched him, this man she had loved with a quiet, fierce devotion for 7 years. She had been his rock, his cheerleader, the one who worked 2 jobs in the early days so he could focus on his budding career in finance. She'd typed his reports, listened to his frustrations about his superiors, and celebrated his small victories with lovingly prepared meals he barely tasted, his mind already on the next rung of the ladder. She had believed in the yes he had sold her, a partnership built on mutual support and future dreams. "Practical," she repeated, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. "Is that what this is, Ben? A practical decision?" He finally looked at her, his hazel eyes cool and appraising. It was the same look he gave his stock portfolio. "It is. I have goals, Anya. We've talked about this. I'm on the cusp of making partner at the firm, the people I need to associate with, the circles I need to move in. They require a certain presentation." He gestured vaguely around their cramped apartment, at the peeling paint near the window, the second-hand furniture she had so carefully curated. "This life, it's holding me back. We are holding me back." The pronoun was a lie, a flimsy attempt to soften a blade meant to sever. He meant her. She was the one holding him back. Her job as a librarian at a local community center, her simple clothes from thrift stores, her lack of interest in the vacuous networking events he dragged her to, where she would inevitably retreat into a corner, uncomfortable under the scrutiny of women dripping in diamonds and condescension. She wasn't an asset. In his world, that was a fatal flaw. "So you're trading me in," she said, her voice trembling despite her efforts to keep it steady. "For a better model? One with a more impressive pedigree?" The barb hit its mark. A flicker of something, guilt perhaps, or just annoyance at being so transparently understood, crossed his face. "Don't be dramatic. It's not like that. We've just grown apart. Our priorities have shifted." His priorities had shifted. Hers had remained stubbornly, foolishly the same. Him. The final betrayal wasn't just the act of leaving, but the reason he gave. He didn't say he'd fallen out of love. He didn't say he'd found someone else, though she suspected that was only a matter of time. He said, in a moment of cruel honesty during their last screaming match, "I can't build an empire with a woman who is content with nothing." His words echoed in her head now, a painful mantra, content with nothing. He saw her quiet happiness, her love for books and rainy afternoons, her satisfaction in helping a child discover a new story as a lack of ambition. He saw her frugality not as a choice, but as a limitation. He saw her as poor, not just in finances, but in spirit, and in his world, that was a terminal diagnosis. He had no idea. He had never once asked about her family, not really. She'd told him they were estranged, that they lived a different kind of life, and he had accepted it at face value, too consumed with his own lineage and legacy to probe into hers. He saw Anya Sharma, the quiet librarian, and assumed that was all there was. He never saw Anya Sterling Sharma, the sole heir to the Sterling Corporation, a global conglomerate with interests in shipping, technology and real estate valued in the tens of billions. He had no clue that the woman he was discarding for being poor could buy his entire investment firm with the interest from her trust fund. She had run away from that world 10 years ago, desperate to live a life that was her own, to be loved for who she was, not what she was worth. She had wanted to escape the suffocating expectations and the gilded cage that had been her childhood. She had wanted something real. And for a while she thought she'd found it with Ben. She had fallen for the charming, driven young man who seemed to see her. Now she understood he had only ever seen a reflection of his own desires. And when that reflection no longer served his purpose, he was shattering the mirror. "I'll have my lawyer send over the papers," Ben said, pulling her back to the grim present. He picked up his tailored suit jacket from the back of a chair. "I've already put a deposit down on a new place in the city. I'll have movers pick up my things tomorrow." He was already gone. His body was still in the room, but his spirit, his future, had vacated the premises long ago. Anya stood up, a strange calm settling over her. The heartbreak was still there, a raw, gaping wound in her chest. But beneath it, something else was stirring. A dormant part of her, a piece of the sterling resolve she had inherited from her formidable grandfather, was beginning to wake up. "Fine," she said, her voice clear and strong, surprising them both. "Send the papers, Ben. Take your things." He paused at the door, a little taken aback by her sudden composure. He had expected more tears, more pleading. He had a whole script prepared for it. She looked at him, really looked at him one last time. She saw the ambition that had warped into greed, the confidence that had curdled into arrogance. She saw the man she had loved and the stranger he had become. And she realized he wasn't just leaving her. He was releasing her. "I hope you find what you're looking for," she said. It wasn't a platitude. It was a curse. Because she knew, with a certainty that was as cold and hard as a diamond, that he never would. He was chasing a horizon that would forever recede, and he had just discarded his only anchor. He gave a curt nod, opened the door and walked out, closing it softly behind him. The click of the latch echoed in the silent apartment. Anya stood alone amidst the ruins of her life. The pain was immense, a physical weight that threatened to crush her. But as she looked at her small pile of belongings, the books filled with other worlds, the mug that had warmed her hands on countless mornings, the quilt that held generations of love in its threads, she didn't feel poor. For the first time in a long time, she felt the faint, unfamiliar flicker of power. He had no idea what he had just done. He had no idea who he had just set free. The drive back to the Sterling estate was a journey through a life she had deliberately forgotten. Leaving the city's urban sprawl behind, the landscape softened into the manicured, old-money elegance of Westchester County. The roads narrowed, winding through dense forests that hid sprawling properties behind formidable stone walls and iron gates. It was a world of quiet, immense power, a world that had always felt more like a prison than a home. When she reached the main gates of Greybourne, the name her grandmother had given the estate, Anya's hands tightened on the steering wheel of her modest 10-year-old sedan. The gates were magnificent, wrought iron forged into an intricate design of intertwined sparrows and sterling silver leaves, a symbol of the family dynasty. To her, they had always looked like the bars of a cage. She hadn't been back in a decade. Not since the explosive argument with her grandfather, Richard Sterling, a man who commanded boardrooms and family members with the same iron will. He had presented her with a life plan, meticulously mapped out. An arranged marriage to the son of a European banking tycoon to merge their empires, a seat on the board, a future sculpted from duty and legacy. When she had refused, demanding a life of her own, he had given her an ultimatum: the Sterling name and all that came with it, or the door. She had chosen the door, walking away with nothing but a small trust her mother had left her, determined to prove she could exist without his gilded puppetry. A security guard, a man she didn't recognize, approached her car, his expression impassive. "Can I help you, miss?" "I'm here to see Richard Sterling," she said, her voice hoarse. "My name is Anya Sharma." He checked his list, his brow furrowing. "I don't have that name down." Of course he didn't. In her grandfather's world, she had ceased to exist. "Tell him it's his granddaughter," she added, the word feeling foreign on her tongue. The guard's eyes widened slightly. He spoke into his radio, his voice a low murmur. A few tense moments passed before the gates, grand and silent, swung inward. The prodigal granddaughter, it seemed, was being granted an audience. The long, winding driveway was flanked by ancient oak trees, their branches forming a canopy overhead. The house came into view slowly, a majestic stone mansion that seemed to rise from the earth itself. It was beautiful, imposing, and as cold as she remembered. Parking her humble car next to a gleaming black Bentley, Anya felt a wave of the old insecurity wash over her. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, a stark contrast to the world she was re-entering. Taking a deep breath, she walked up the stone steps and through the heavy oak doors, which were opened by a butler who looked as ancient and unyielding as the house itself. "Miss Anya," he said, his voice a gravelly whisper of surprise. His name was Fields, and he had been there since her childhood. A flicker of warmth in his eyes was the only welcome she received. "Mr. Sterling is in his study." The walk to the study was a haunting tour of her past. The grand foyer with its soaring ceilings and a chandelier that dripped crystals like frozen tears. The portraits of stern-faced ancestors lining the walls, their eyes seeming to follow her with disapproval. The suffocating silence, broken only by the tick-tock of a grandfather clock that measured time in generations, not hours. Richard Sterling was exactly as she remembered him, seated behind a massive mahogany desk, his back ramrod straight, his silver hair perfectly coiffed. He was 85, but his eyes, a piercing shade of blue, were as sharp and calculating as ever. The study was his throne room, filled with leather-bound books he'd never read and artifacts from his global conquests. The air smelled of old paper, leather, and power. He didn't stand. He simply watched her approach, his expression unreadable. He gestured to the chair opposite his desk, an invitation that felt like a summons. "Anya," he said, his voice a low rumble. "To what do I owe this unexpected return?" The chasm of 10 years lay between them, filled with unspoken accusations and wounded pride. She hadn't come here for a joyful reunion. She had come here because she had nowhere else to go. Ben had shattered her carefully constructed world, and this was the only one she had left. "Hello, grandfather," she said, her voice steady. She would not show him the weakness that was churning inside her. I needed to come back." "Needed to," he scoffed, a faint, cruel smile touching his lips. "Don't tell me the real world finally proved too much for you. I believe I warned you about that. You threw away a birthright for a fantasy, for some naive notion of normalcy." His words were like daggers, aimed at the freshest of her wounds. The fantasy he spoke of was the life she had tried to build with Ben, a life that had just crumbled into dust. "My life is my own concern," she stated, lifting her chin. I'm not here to apologize. Then why are you here? He pressed, leaning forward. Don't waste my time with sentiment, girl. You were never very good at it. You are a sterling. We are transactional people. What do you want? The cold, brutal honesty of it was almost a relief. This, she understood. This was the language of her upbringing. I want what is mine, she said, the words surprising her with their force. They came from that newly awakened part of her, the part that was tired of being small, of being underestimated. Richard leaned back, a genuine spark of interest in his eyes. He steepled his fingers, studying her as if she were a new acquisition. And what, precisely, do you believe is yours? My place, she said, gaining confidence. My inheritance. I abdicated, I know, but I am your only living direct descendant. I am the heir to this company, to this legacy. She gestured around the room. And I want to claim it. For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of the clock. Her grandfather's expression was a mask of cold contemplation. She had expected him to laugh, to throw her out. But he didn't. You walk in here after 10 years of silence, he said slowly, looking like you've been sleeping in your car, and you demand to be handed a multi-billion-dollar empire. The audacity is impressive. It's the most sterling thing you've done in a decade. He stood up and walked to the large bay window overlooking the vast, manicured gardens. The world you've been living in, the world of dusty books and minimum wage, is a child's playground. The world I inhabit is a battlefield. The wolves on my board would eat you alive before you even found your seat. You have no experience, no training, no concept of what it takes to run this company. Then train me, she shot back, standing as well. Teach me. You wanted a puppet, and I refused. But I am not refusing to learn. I am not refusing to lead. I am your blood. I have your mind. You know I do. He turned to face her, a complex mix of emotions swirling in his sharp blue eyes, skepticism, pride, and a deep, calculating curiosity. He saw the fire in her, the same fire he possessed. He saw the pain that was fueling it, and like any good businessman, he saw an opportunity. You want to come back? He said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush. Fine, but there are conditions. You will live here, under my roof. You will start at the bottom as my personal assistant. You will learn every facet of this business from the ground up. You will follow my every order without question. You will prove to me, and more importantly, to the board, that you are not the sentimental fool who ran away, but a true sterling, ruthless and ready to rule. He was testing her, pushing her, trying to see if she would break. Anya thought of Ben's dismissive face, of his cruel words. I can't build an empire with a woman who is content with nothing. A bitter smile touched her lips. He thought I was nothing, she whispered, more to herself than to him. Who? Her grandfather demanded. She looked him straight in the eye, her resolve hardening into steel. My husband, my soon-to-be ex-husband. The mention of a husband she'd never spoken of clearly intrigued him. He raised a silver eyebrow. So there's a man involved in this, he mused. This has all the makings of a proper drama. Excellent. Nothing sharpens the mind like a little heartbreak and a thirst for revenge. He walked back to his desk and extended a hand. It was not a gesture of welcome, but of contract. Do we have a deal, Anya Sterling Sharma? Anya looked at his outstretched hand, the hand that had once tried to control her destiny. Now it was offering her the tools to forge a new one. She was trading one cage for another, but this time she knew the rules. This time she would be the one to master them. She placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, unyielding. We have a deal, grandfather, she said. The game had just begun, and this time she would not be a pawn. The transformation from Anya Sharma, community librarian, to Anya Sterling Sharma, personal assistant to the CEO of Sterling Corporation, was as brutal as it was swift. Her grandfather was true to his word. He started her at the very bottom of the top. Her life became a whirlwind of 5 a.m. wake-up calls, meticulous schedule management, and an endless deluge of information she was expected to absorb through sheer osmosis. Her small apartment, once a sanctuary, was packed up and put into storage. Her new home was a suite of rooms in a wing of the Greybourne mansion, opulent and impersonal. The antique furniture was priceless, the art on the walls was museum quality, and the silence was deafening. It felt less like a bedroom and more like a beautifully appointed holding cell. She traded her thrift store sweaters for a wardrobe of impeccably tailored suits and dresses in shades of grey, navy and black. The sterling uniform. The clothes felt like a costume, a shell she was meant to grow into. Her days were spent trailing Richard Sterling like a shadow. She sat in on meetings where billions of dollars were discussed with the casual air of ordering lunch. She learned about leveraged buyouts, hostile takeovers, and market volatility. The men and women around the boardroom table were sharks, their smiles sharp, their eyes missing nothing. They looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and disdain, the prodigal granddaughter, the untrained interloper. They whispered about her in the hallways, their words dripping with skepticism. Richard did nothing to shield her. In fact, he seemed to enjoy throwing her into the deep end. "The preliminary financials for the Singapore shipping acquisition," he would bark, tossing a thick binder onto her desk. "Summarize it for me. I want a one-page brief on my desk in an hour. Focus on the liabilities." The first few weeks were a nightmare of exhaustion and self-doubt. The sheer volume of work was staggering. The corporate jargon was a foreign language she had to learn on the fly. More than once she found herself staring at a spreadsheet at 2 a.m., her vision blurred, the numbers swimming before her eyes, the bitter taste of failure in her mouth. She thought of Ben, of the simple life he had so easily discarded. There were moments of weakness where she missed it. Missed the quiet anonymity, the feeling of being loved, even if that love had been an illusion. But then the image of his face, cool and dismissive, would flash in her mind, content with nothing, and the sterling fire inside her would ignite. She would take a deep breath, drink another cup of black coffee, and force the numbers to make sense. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to shift. The rhythm of the business world, once chaotic, began to have a pattern. She started to recognize the names, the companies, the intricate dance of power and influence. She learned to read between the lines of a legal document, to spot the flaw in a financial projection. Her mind, always sharp and analytical from her love of literature and history, began to apply those skills to this new cutthroat narrative. She discovered she had a knack for strategy, for seeing the larger picture, a trait she undoubtedly inherited from the man she was working for. Her grandfather remained a demanding, inscrutable mentor. He never praised her. He only pointed out her mistakes, his critiques as sharp and precise as a surgeon's scalpel. "Your summary of the merger was adequate, but you missed the political implications in paragraph 3. A C- effort, Anya. Do it again." Yet she started to notice small things. He would leave a specific book on her desk, a biography of a rival CEO, a history of the stock market, without comment. In meetings, when someone would direct a patronizing question at her, he would fall silent, his piercing gaze daring her to answer for herself. He was testing her, yes, but he was also teaching her, forging her in the crucible of his own making. One evening, after a grueling 14-hour day, she brought him his nightly glass of whiskey in the study. He was looking at an old photograph on his desk. She caught a glimpse of it, a young woman with Anya's eyes and a warm, gentle smile, holding a small child. Her mother. "She was too soft for this world," Richard said quietly, not looking up. "Your father, he was a dreamer, an artist, a good man but weak. He couldn't protect her." Her parents had died in a sailing accident when she was 12. Her grandfather rarely spoke of them. "I see her in you," he continued, his voice gruff. "That softness. I tried to stamp it out of you when you were a child, to make you strong. Instead, I drove you away." He finally looked up, and for the first time, Anya saw not the CEO, but an old man haunted by regret. "I will not make that mistake again. This world will try to break you. It will chew up your softness and spit it out. You must be harder than it is. You must be smarter. You must be a sterling." It was the closest he had ever come to an apology, to an admission of love. It was a raw, unguarded moment, and it changed something between them. The resentment she had harbored for him for so long began to coexist with a new, complex understanding. He was not just a tyrant. He was a man terrified of weakness, a man who saw strength as the only armor against a world that had taken his daughter from him. The psychological toll was immense. Anya felt herself changing. The quiet, gentle woman who found joy in the rustle of book pages was being overlaid with a new persona, sharp, focused, and increasingly cynical. She was learning to compartmentalize, to silence the part of her that yearned for simple connection, and to amplify the part that craved success, that thrived on the intellectual combat of the boardroom. The final piece of her old life was severed one afternoon when a crisp manila envelope arrived for her. The divorce papers from Ben's lawyer. She signed them with a steady hand. In the sterile environment of the Sterling Corp legal department, a notary public stamping the documents with a final, indifferent thud. There was no ceremony, no tears. She felt a pang of sadness for the woman who had once believed in that marriage, but that woman felt like a stranger now. She slid the signed papers into an outbound envelope, addressing it to Ben's high-powered law firm. As she did, she paused. On a whim, she took a sheet of her new, ridiculously expensive personal stationery, heavy cream stock, embossed with a single discreet S, and wrote a short note. "Ben, thank you for the push. It was exactly what I needed. Anya." She sealed the envelope, a small, cold smile on her face. It was a declaration of war he wouldn't even understand he was fighting. He thought he had leveled up, leaving her behind in his quest for power and wealth. He had no idea she was now playing an entirely different game, on a field so vast he couldn't even comprehend its boundaries. He was climbing a ladder. She was preparing to own the entire building. 3 months into her new life, her grandfather decided it was time for Anya's unofficial debut into the society she had fled. The event was the annual Sterling Foundation Gala, a high-profile charity affair that was the pinnacle of the New York social calendar. It was a night where titans of industry, politicians, and old money families converged to peacock their wealth and influence, all under the guise of philanthropy. For Anya, it was a trial by fire. "You will be my escort," Richard announced one morning, as if he were informing her of a new board meeting. "You will be seen, you will be spoken about, and you will be judged. Your every word, every gesture will be analyzed. Do not disappoint me." The preparation was like gearing up for battle. A stylist, a severe-looking woman with a Parisian accent, was summoned to the mansion. She brought racks of designer gowns that cost more than Anya's old car. Anya felt like a doll being dressed, an object being polished for display. She finally settled on a deep emerald green silk gown. It was elegant and understated, but the way it clung to her form felt both powerful and dangerously exposed. Diamonds, borrowed, she was told, from a jeweler, as a sterling does not wear their own in public unless making a statement, were clasped around her neck and wrist. Her hair was swept up in an intricate style, and her makeup was flawless. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. The haunted, heartbroken librarian was gone. In her place was a stranger with cold, determined eyes. She looked expensive. She looked like a sterling. Arriving at the gala, held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, was a sensory assault. The flash of cameras, the roar of the crowd held back by velvet ropes, the cascade of light and noise. As she stepped out of the chauffeured car and took her grandfather's arm, a hush fell over the reporters closest to them, followed by a frantic burst of questions. "Mr. Sterling, who is your companion tonight? Is this the mysterious granddaughter?" Richard ignored them all, his face a mask of regal indifference, and guided Anya up the grand staircase. He was a king in his element, and tonight he was presenting his heir. The inside was a glittering sea of power. Anya felt hundreds of eyes on her, their gazes a physical weight. Whispers followed them as they moved through the room. She could feel the speculation, the sizing up. She kept her back straight, her chin high, just as her grandfather had instructed. She smiled when he introduced her to people whose names were synonymous with wealth and power, her mind racing to recall the dossiers she had studied on each of them. She spoke intelligently about market trends and philanthropic initiatives, her voice calm and measured. She was playing the part, and to her own surprise, she was playing it well. But the psychological conflict was raging within her. Part of her was disgusted by the ostentatious display, the superficial conversations, the sheer, breathtaking waste of it all. This was the world she had run from, a world that measured a person's worth by their portfolio and their last name. Yet another part of her, the sterling part, felt a thrill. There was an undeniable energy in the room, a current of immense power that was intoxicating. She was no longer an outsider looking in. She was at the center of the storm. She was speaking to a senator when she saw him, Benjamin Carter. He was standing across the vast, crowded hall near a champagne fountain. He was laughing, schmoozing with a group of men she recognized as partners from a rival firm. And on his arm was a blonde, impeccably dressed woman whose family, Anya knew from her research, owned a significant portion of downtown real estate. He had found his asset. The sight of him was like a physical blow. The air rushed from her lungs. For a moment, the curated composure, the sterling armor, threatened to crack. The pain of his betrayal, which she had so carefully compartmentalized, came rushing back, fresh and raw. She saw the man she had loved, the life they had shared, and the casual cruelty with which he had discarded it. Her grandfather, sensing the shift in her, followed her gaze. His eyes narrowed. "Ah," he said softly, a note of grim satisfaction in his voice. "The husband. So, he swims in these waters now." "He's a guest of Harrison Croft," Anya murmured, her mind automatically clicking into strategic mode, identifying the people around him. "Croft's firm is trying to broker a deal with our European division. And he brought his little guppy with him to impress the sharks," Richard finished, a contemptuous smile on his lips. "Pathetic." Ben hadn't seen her yet. He was too engrossed in his performance, playing the part of the up-and-coming titan. He looked confident, successful, exactly the man he had always wanted to be. "Go," her grandfather said, his voice a low command in her ear. "Do not hide, do not run. You are a sterling. This room is yours. He is an insect in it. Act like it." His words were like a splash of ice water. He was right. Hiding would be a victory for Ben. She took a steadying breath, the emerald silk of her dress cool against her skin. She detached herself from the senator with a polite nod and began to walk. She didn't walk towards Ben, but on a path that would inevitably intersect with his. She moved with a newfound grace and purpose, a ghost from his past materializing in the heart of his desired future. As she got closer, one of the men in Ben's circle noticed her. His eyes widened, and he nudged his friend. The conversation faltered. Ben, sensing the change in atmosphere, turned. His eyes met hers. The smooth, confident smile on his face froze, then vanished. His glass of champagne stilled halfway to his lips. His face drained of color. He looked as if he had seen an apparition. He saw Anya, his quiet, thrift store-wearing librarian wife, standing in the opulent splendor of the Met Gala, draped in silk and diamonds, looking more powerful and beautiful than he had ever seen her. It was a vision that did not compute. His brain stuttered, trying to reconcile the woman he had discarded with the goddess standing before him. Anya didn't break her stride. She gave him a small, cool smile, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated power. It said, "You have no idea." She walked right past him without a word, as if he were nothing more than a piece of furniture. She could feel his stunned, unblinking gaze on her back. She could feel the confused and intrigued stares of his companions. She had not created a scene. She had done something far more devastating. She had rendered him insignificant. She reached her grandfather's side, her heart pounding in her chest, a mixture of terror and exhilarating triumph coursing through her veins. Richard Sterling placed a hand on her arm, his grip firm and approving. "Well done," he murmured, his sharp blue eyes gleaming with pride. "Very well done indeed. The first lesson is complete. Your greatest power is not your money, Anya. It's their utter, complete underestimation of you." Anya looked back across the room. Ben was still standing there, motionless, his new girlfriend looking at him with a confused frown. He looked small, lost, a man whose carefully constructed reality had just been shattered by a ghost in an emerald dress. For the first time that night, Anya's smile reached her eyes. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a queen who had just checkmated a pawn. The image of Anya at the gala haunted Ben. It was a glitch in his reality, a puzzle he couldn't solve. He spent the entire night replaying the moment in his head. The emerald dress, the impossible diamonds, the chillingly confident smile. He had tried to function, to continue his networking, but his performance was hollow. His companion, a shrewd real estate heiress named Catherine, had noticed his distraction immediately. "Who was that woman, Ben?" she had asked in the car on the way home, her tone sharp. "You looked like you'd seen a ghost." "No one," he'd lied too quickly. "Just someone I used to know." But the lie was thin, and the following days were a torment of cognitive dissonance. He'd tried to rationalize it. Maybe Anya had a rich new boyfriend. Maybe she was a +1 for some wealthy librarian benefactor. But none of it fit. The way she carried herself, the way Richard Sterling, had his hand on her arm, protective and proprietary, it didn't make sense. His obsession began to bleed into his work. He was distracted in meetings, his mind drifting back to that moment. He made a critical error in a financial model, transposing two numbers, a mistake his superiors caught and for which he was harshly reprimanded. The partnership he had been so close to grasping suddenly seemed to be slipping through his fingers. His carefully constructed ascent was faltering. Driven by a gnawing uncertainty, he did what he did best. He started digging. He hired a private investigator, a discreet man who specialized in financial and background checks for the city's elite. "I want to know everything about her," Ben instructed, trying to sound casual. "Anya Sharma, my ex-wife. I just want to make sure she's okay." The pretext was flimsy, but the investigator, a man named Costello, simply nodded, his face impassive. He was paid not to ask questions. While he waited for the report, Ben's world continued to subtly tilt on its axis. He received a formal notice that the finalization of their divorce, which should have been a simple, straightforward process, was being handled by a new law firm on Anya's behalf. Sterling, Cromwell, and Finch. Ben knew the name. It was one of the most powerful corporate law firms in the world. They didn't handle divorces for librarians. They handled multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions. It was like hiring a nuclear submarine to go fishing. A cold dread began to pool in his stomach. The breaking point came a week later. Costello, the private investigator, called him. "The report is ready," he said, his voice flat. "But you're going to want to see this in person." They met at a quiet bar in Midtown. Costello slid a thick file across the table. Ben opened it, his hands trembling slightly. The first page was a simple biography, Anya Sharma. But then he saw the hyphenated name he'd never known, Anya Sterling Sharma. His eyes scanned down the page. Parents deceased. Grandfather, Richard Sterling, CEO and chairman of Sterling Corporation. Ben's breath caught in his throat. It had to be a mistake, a different Sterling. But as he flipped through the pages, the evidence was irrefutable. Birth certificates, school records from an exclusive Swiss boarding school, trust fund documents detailing an inheritance so vast the numbers seemed fake. Photographs of Anya as a child on yachts and at lavish estates, standing next to the same formidable old man from the gala. The world went silent. The muted chatter of the bar, the clinking of glasses, it all faded away. There was only the roaring in his ears. He saw it all with a horrifying, gut-wrenching clarity. Her simple life wasn't a limitation, it was a choice. Her estrangement from her family wasn't about some petty squabble. It was a rebellion against a world of unimaginable wealth. Her thrift store clothes, her second-hand furniture, her quiet contentment, it wasn't a lack of ambition. It was a rejection of the very things he worshipped. He hadn't just divorced a librarian. He had divorced the sole heir to the sterling empire. The phrase he had thrown at her, the cruelest thing he had ever said, came back to him with the force of a physical blow. I can't build an empire with a woman who is content with nothing. He had been standing next to an empire that could have been his, and he had been utterly, completely blind. The sheer monumental stupidity of his actions crashed down on him. His ambition, his careful calculations, his social climbing. It was all a child's game compared to the power she wielded, power she had kept hidden from him for 7 years. But the horror was deeper than just the misfortune. He started to question everything. Had she been laughing at him the entire time? Was their whole marriage some kind of social experiment for a bored heiress? The thought was poison, twisting his pride, his sense of self, into a knot of agonizing humiliation. He had preened and postured, boasting about his minor successes, his pathetic bonuses, to a woman who could buy and sell him 1,000 times over. He felt like the world's biggest fool. He left the bar in a daze, stumbling out into the harsh city lights. He went back to his sleek, empty apartment, the one he had been so proud of, and it now felt like a cheap movie set. He looked at his tailored suits, his expensive watch, the symbols of the success he had sacrificed his marriage for, and they seemed like trinkets, like pathetic props in a tragedy of his own making. In the days that followed, Ben unraveled. He tried to call her, but her old number was disconnected. He went to her library, but was told she no longer worked there. He was locked out, completely. The access he once had, the intimacy he had taken for granted, was gone. His work suffered catastrophically. The partnership, once a certainty, was officially put on hold. His superiors cited his lack of focus and unpredictable behavior. Catherine, his heiress girlfriend, grew tired of his erratic moods and obsessive questions about the Sterling family and ended their relationship with a cool, dismissive text message. He was losing everything he thought he had gained. One night, drunk and desperate, he drove out to Westchester, to the address listed for the Greybourne estate. He parked on the road outside the magnificent iron gates, staring at the distant lights of the mansion. He saw a black town car sweep through the gates, and for a fleeting second he thought he saw her silhouette in the back window. He was the outsider now, locked out, looking in at a world he had been too blind to see. He had judged Anya on the shallowest of metrics, her income, her clothes, her social connections. He had failed to see her true worth, the quiet strength, the hidden depths, the fierce integrity that had led her to walk away from a fortune in search of something real. He had been offered something real, and he had traded it for a counterfeit version of success. Sitting there in his car, with the file from the investigator lying on the passenger seat like an indictment, Benjamin Carter finally understood. He hadn't just made a mistake. He had committed an act of self-destruction on an epic scale. He hadn't lost a wife. He had lost his soul, and he knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that this was only the beginning of his fall. While Ben's world was imploding, Anya's was expanding at an exponential rate. The gala had been a turning point. It had forced her to confront her past and Ben's betrayal on a public stage, and instead of crumbling, she had discovered a reservoir of strength she never knew she possessed. The cool smile she had given him was more than just a power play. It was a severing of the final emotional cord that tied her to her old life. The pain was still there, a dull ache in a hidden part of her heart, but it no longer defined her. It was now fuel. Her grandfather, pleased with her performance, accelerated her training. She was given her own office, a corner suite with panoramic views of the city that was larger than her entire old apartment. She was assigned a small team of analysts and researchers. Her title was officially changed from personal assistant to Vice President of Strategic Development. The whispers in the hallway changed from skeptical to fearful. The work consumed her, but in a way that felt empowering rather than draining. She discovered a genuine passion for the business, not for the money, but for the intricate strategy, the global chess game of it all. She excelled at identifying undervalued assets and potential growth markets, her librarian's mind for research and pattern recognition proving to be a formidable weapon. She wasn't just playing a part anymore, she was becoming the role. However, the more she assimilated into the Sterling world, the more she wrestled with her own identity. Was she losing the woman who loved quiet afternoons and the smell of old books? She made a conscious effort to hold on to that part of herself. Late at night, in her opulent suite at Greybourne, she would kick off her designer heels, curl up in a window seat, and read, not market reports or financial statements, but novels and poetry, the words a lifeline to the person she had been. It was during this period that she began to conceptualize what would become her legacy project. While reviewing the Sterling Foundation's activities, she found them to be cold and corporate, focused on large, impersonal donations to universities and museums, projects that were more about tax benefits and public relations than genuine impact. It was philanthropy as a business transaction, and it left her cold. She remembered her days at the community library, the children from low-income families whose only access to books and computers was through their doors. She remembered the literacy programs they struggled to fund, the sense of community that place had fostered. That was real. That mattered. Anya spent weeks secretly working on a new proposal. She leveraged her research team to gather data on literacy rates, educational inequality, and the decline of community spaces in underserved neighborhoods across the country. She designed a comprehensive multi-year initiative, the Sterling Sparrow Project. The plan was to fund and build state-of-the-art libraries and community learning centers equipped with the latest technology, job training resources, and arts programs directly in the heart of the communities that needed them most. The name was a quiet nod to her favorite chipped mug, a symbol of her old life, a reminder of where she had come from. When she was ready, she requested a formal meeting with her grandfather, not as his granddaughter, but as a vice president of the corporation. She presented her proposal in the main boardroom, the same room where she had once sat silently, trying to decipher the corporate jargon. She laid out the data, the financial projections, and the long-term social return on investment. She spoke with a passion and authority that silenced the room. She wasn't just presenting a charity initiative, she was presenting a new vision for the Sterling legacy, one that balanced profit with purpose. The Sterling name is associated with power, with wealth, with influence, she concluded, her eyes meeting her grandfather's across the polished table. I believe it's time it was also associated with opportunity. Not as a handout, but as an investment in human potential. This is how we build a legacy that lasts. When she finished, the room was silent. The other board members looked toward Richard, waiting for his verdict. He had been listening intently, his face an unreadable mask. He was quiet for a long, tense minute. "The projected costs are substantial," he said finally, his voice neutral. "The long-term benefits, both to our brand and to the communities we operate in, are immeasurable," Anya countered calmly. "It's a strategic investment." Richard Sterling looked at his granddaughter. He saw not the runaway idealist, nor the ruthless executive he was trying to mold, but a synthesis of the two. She had her mother's compassion and his own strategic mind. She had found a way to bridge the two worlds that had been at war within her. She was not just claiming her birthright, she was redefining it. A slow smile spread across his face. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated pride. "The Sterling Sparrow Project," he said, testing the name. He looked at the board. "It has my full support. We start immediately. Anya will lead it." It was the ultimate validation. It was more significant than any title or office. He had not just approved her project, he had endorsed her vision. In the months that followed, Anya threw herself into the project. It was a perfect fusion of her skills. She was as comfortable negotiating land deals and construction contracts as she was designing the layout of a children's reading room. She traveled the country, meeting with community leaders, educators, and local residents. She was no longer just a corporate executive in an ivory tower. She was on the ground, making a tangible difference. She was finally integrating the two halves of herself. The quiet librarian who believed in the power of stories now had the resources of a global corporation to bring those stories to everyone. She was Anya Sterling Sharma, and for the first time, the name felt whole. It felt like her own. One afternoon, while visiting the construction site of the first Sparrow Center in a struggling part of the Bronx, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. "Anya." The voice was hesitant, broken. She recognized it instantly. It was Ben. The sound of his voice sent a jolt through her, a phantom limb of a life long amputated. But it wasn't a jolt of pain or of anger. It was a jolt of distance. He sounded like someone from a very old story, a character whose fate no longer concerned her. "Ben?" she said, her voice even. The noise of construction equipment clanged in the background. I know everything," he stammered. "I'm so sorry, Anya. I was a fool, an idiot. I threw away the most incredible thing in my life because I was too blind and stupid to see it. Please, can I just see you? Can I just talk to you?" He was pleading, the desperation raw in his voice. The power dynamic had been completely inverted. He was the one begging for a moment of her time. Anya looked around her. She saw the steel frame of a new building rising from the ground, a place that would soon be filled with books, with hope, with opportunity. She saw the future she was building. Then she thought of Ben, a man trapped in the wreckage of his own shallow ambitions. Her redemption was never about him. It was never about revenge. It was about finding herself, about reclaiming her own power and using it to build something meaningful. His downfall was simply a byproduct of his own choices, a footnote in her much larger story. "No, Ben," she said, and her voice was not cold or cruel, but calm and resolute. "There's nothing left to say. We have nothing to talk about." She paused, then added one last thing, not for his sake, but for hers. "I do hope you find what you're looking for. Goodbye." She ended the call before he could reply. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and turned her attention back to the building, to the future. A gust of wind blew dust across the construction site, and for a moment she felt completely, utterly free. The ghost of her past had been laid to rest, not by vengeance, but by purpose, and her real work was just beginning. A year after the gala, Anya stood on a stage in front of the first completed Sterling Sparrow Center. It was a beautiful, modern building of glass and warm wood, nestled in a community that had been starved for resources for decades. The autumn air was crisp, and the crowd before her was a vibrant mix of local families, city officials, journalists, and the stern, black-suited members of the Sterling board. Her grandfather sat in the front row, looking frailer than he had a year ago, but his eyes, fixed on her, were sharp with pride. In the past year, their relationship had transformed from a tense mentorship into a partnership of mutual respect. He had given her autonomy, and she, in turn, had revitalized the philanthropic heart of his empire, generating more positive press and goodwill than he had managed in 50 years. Anya, dressed in a sharp but approachable navy blue dress, spoke from the heart. She talked about the power of stories, the importance of community, and the fundamental belief that talent is universal, but opportunity is not. Her voice was steady, filled with a passion that was authentic and contagious. This wasn't Anya Sterling Sharma, the corporate executive, speaking. This was Anya, the librarian, who had simply been given a bigger library to build. As she looked out at the faces of the children in the audience, their eyes wide with excitement, she felt a profound sense of rightness, a deep and abiding peace that all the money in the world could not buy. This was real. This was her purpose. She had taken the pain of her past, the gilded cage of her family, the cruelty of Ben's rejection, and transformed it all into this, a place of hope. After the ceremony, as she was shaking hands and accepting congratulations, a junior aide from her office approached her, a nervous look on her face. "Ms. Sterling Sharma," she whispered, "there's someone here who insists on speaking with you. He says it's a personal matter." Anya followed the aide to a quiet corner behind the main stage, and there, standing awkwardly, looking utterly defeated, was Benjamin Carter. He was a shadow of the man he had been. His expensive suit was rumpled, his face was gaunt, and there were dark circles under his eyes. The arrogant confidence was gone, replaced by a hollow, haunted look. He had lost his job months ago, a casualty of his own obsession and declining performance. The word on the street was that he was financially ruined, his reputation in tatters. "Anya," he said, his voice raspy, I saw you on the news. What you're doing here, it's incredible." "What do you want, Ben?" she asked, her tone not unkind but weary. She had no anger left for him. He was like a relic from a past life, an artifact she no longer had any use for. "I wanted to apologize," he said, his eyes pleading, "not on the phone, face to face. I need you to know that I see it now. I see you. I was so caught up in what I thought success was, the money, the status, that I couldn't see the real treasure right in front of me. You were everything, and I threw you away for nothing." He took a hesitant step closer. "I'm not asking for a second chance. I know I don't deserve one. I had to tell you. You were the best part of my life, and my biggest regret will always be that I wasn't man enough to see it." She listened, and for the first time she believed he was being sincere. The desperation, the ambition had been stripped away, and all that was left was the raw, painful truth of his failure. She saw the man he could have been before his insecurities and greed had consumed him. A flicker of the old affection, the memory of the man she had once loved, stirred within her. And in that moment, Anya faced her final test. It wasn't about power or money or revenge. It was about the nature of her own heart. Could she forgive him? What did redemption truly mean? She thought about her journey. She had come back to the Sterling world seeking power, seeking a way to prove her worth to the man who had discarded her. But along the way she had found something far more valuable, her own purpose. Her redemption had nothing to do with him. "I believe you, Ben," she said softly, "and I appreciate the apology." A glimmer of hope sparked in his eyes. "Anya!" "But an apology doesn't erase the past," she continued gently but firmly. "You didn't just break my heart, you broke my trust. You showed me that your love was conditional, based on a balance sheet I didn't even know we were keeping, and that's not something I can ever go back to." She saw the last flicker of hope die in his eyes, replaced by a sad, resigned acceptance. He nodded slowly, understanding. "I have a new life now, Ben," she said, gesturing back toward the center. "A life I am building on my own terms. It's a good life, and I am happy." It was the truth. The happiness was quiet, solid, and completely her own. It didn't depend on a man's approval or a family's legacy. It was forged in her own actions, in the purpose she had found. "I wish you well," she said, a final act of grace. "I hope you find a way to rebuild, to find a different kind of success." She turned and walked away, leaving him standing there. She didn't look back. There was no triumph in his defeat, only a quiet sadness for the man he had failed to become. Rejoining the celebration, she saw her grandfather watching her, a knowing look on his face. He had seen Ben arrive and had let her handle it, her final graduation. He raised his glass to her in a silent toast. Later that evening, long after the crowds had gone, Anya stood alone in the new library. The smell of new books and fresh paint filled the air. She ran her hand along the spine of a book, the smooth cover cool beneath her fingers. She was not the runaway heiress anymore, nor the scorned wife. She was the architect of her own life. She had faced the demons of her past, her family's suffocating legacy and her husband's devastating betrayal, and had emerged not broken, but stronger, more whole. She had found the one thing she had walked away from a fortune to find 10 years ago, a life that was truly her own, and it was more magnificent than she had ever imagined. The sterling sparrow had finally found her wings. Anya's journey shows us that true power isn't about the money you have, but the purpose you find. She transformed the deepest betrayal into her greatest strength, proving that sometimes being underestimated is the ultimate advantage. Her story is a powerful reminder that our worth is not defined by anyone else's judgment. If this story of heartbreak, resilience, and incredible redemption moved you, please hit that like button to let us know. Don't forget to share it with someone who loves a story of triumph against the odds. And for more compelling stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat, make sure to subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. Thank you for watching.